It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. Welcome in, everybody. Episode number 617 of the Rico. We are going to hit on a variety of topics. We're going to hit on a billion different topics. We are going to open up the Rico Brogna mailbag. Pete Hoffman, the fine producer of the Rico, had a very rough week, not only in his job on the Carton Show, but certainly here on the Rico. If you guys are not aware, he was the one who put the X-nay on my question for Rob Manfred when he joined the Carton Show. And Pete came to me and said, look, I have an innovative idea for this mailbag Rico Brogna, something we have never done on the Rico that I think will get you to kind of be okay with me and the audience to be okay with me. So we will get to that in a few short minutes. As far as my question for Rob Manfred, I thought it was completely fair. For those that are not aware, my question was simply, hey, Mr. Commissioner, the players will never, ever, 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 ever accept the salary cap. Can you commit to us as fans that you are not going to waste our time by pushing a salary cap that you know the players are never going to accept? I mean, there's some opinion in that question, but yeah, I wanted to hear if this commissioner would commit to something like that. Obviously, he wouldn't, but Pete did not approve that question being asked. We'll get into some of the things Rob Manfred said because some of it was very, very interesting and certainly confusing. But the first thing I want to hit on before we open up the mailbag, before we get to Hoff's innovative idea, is the arbitration stuff going on right now. Now, the Mets have cleared with all of their guys. There are no battles like Luis Torrens, and the Mets settled at $2.2 million, which is fine. That's his final year of team control. Torrens is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. They settled with Tyler Miguel, who unfortunately is not going to pitch this year. Reed Garrett, who's not going to pitch this year. David Peterson, final year of team control at $8.1 million. And Huascar Brazoban at $1.05 million. But the big story around arbitration or a potential arbitration hearing is Tarik Skubal. And it's not that it's surprising that Skubal and the Tigers didn't settle, but what's surprising to me, and maybe this is going to be me showing you how pro player I tend to be, which I guess I tend to be, is that the Tigers disrespected Tarik Skubal by offering him $19 million. And while that's a huge number in terms of the history of what pitchers have gotten paid in arbitration, he is coming off historical outputs. And so Skubal and his agent, obviously Scott Boras, is filing for $32 million, which is probably what he deserves. I mean, when you think about his accomplishments over the last couple of years, but that gap between $19 million that Detroit is filing and $32 million, which is what Skubal is filing, is historic. And I think the reaction most people have, and certainly I had, was if you guys are this far apart on a one-year deal to kind of patch it together until free agency, if you're going to be historically far apart, aren't you telling us that you have zero interest in signing Tarik Skubal long-term? And I think we already knew that. Like, I think we already kind of had the assumptions that while the Tigers can be a big market team, and in the past have been a big market team, when you look at the Verlander contract, the Miguel Cabrera contract, even recently the Javier Baez contract, which certainly hasn't worked out, they can be a big market team when they want. And kind of this is my issue with the commissioner in the state of Major League Baseball. We can bitch all we want about the LA Dodgers and even the Mets and the Yankees. Teams can spend when they want to spend. It's that they choose not to. But the Tigers are showing you with this arbitration offer, they are not competing for Tarik Skubal's services when he enters free agency at the end of the 2026 season. Now, does that automatically mean that they're going to trade him? It doesn't, because the Tigers could still be committing to the fact that they are trying to win a world championship this year, even in knowing they are not keeping Skubal, nor are they serious about keeping Skubal. But you would think that this is a reminder to Tarik that as much as he likes Detroit, and he has shown this offseason that he does, I think he's been at Piston games and Red Wing games, and he's showing up, right? He appears to be someone that actually likes the community And hey, if the Tigers were willing to spend, would probably stay. It doesn't feel like a guy who's in a rush to leave, which I guess is a credit to him and a credit to the city of Detroit. But this difference in finances, it shows you that they're not serious players to keep them. But here we are in the middle of January. I mean, we are closer to the beginning of spring training than we are to the end of the World Series and the beginning of the offseason. It doesn't feel like there's a real indicator that Detroit is seriously going to listen on him. And my opinion on trading for Skubal has varied this offseason. Like when the offseason first began, I was gung-ho for it. I think the state of this current roster has led me towards I don't want to give a boatload of prospects up when I don't really feel like I have a championship team. Now, the beauty of baseball is, yes, are the Mets capable of sneaking in and being a playoff team? Sure. But if I'm doing a all-in trade, and trading for Tarik Skubal is without question an all-in trade, I have to feel better about this current roster, and I don't. And speaking of this current roster, what is scary about what the Mets may not do is also about what our rivals may do. And one of the stories that has come out in the last few days is that the Philadelphia Phillies are meeting with Bo Bichette. If the Philadelphia Phillies sign Bo Bichette, and I think it's logical that if they sign him, Alec Bohm, who's been on the trade market all offseason despite not being traded, is just the guy who's out. Like, they'll trade him. They'll get something back for Alec Bohm. I don't think they're going to have to, get a bag of balls. But Bo Bichette is a significant upgrade. And it's scary. It's scary to think that the Philadelphia Phillies, who were better than the Mets last year, and if we're being perfectly honest, have been better than the Mets for multiple years. Because even the year we knocked them off, 2024, the magical year where we beat them in the divisional series, they were a better team. Now, granted, we had that better run over the last few months, the magic of 2024, but the regular season, which is a pretty big sample size, the Philadelphia Phillies were a better team. Obviously, last year, even though things looked different in April, May, and early June, and things felt different upon sweeping them in late August, the Philadelphia Phillies were a better team. Well, let's think about their status right now. They've retained, and I know that's sort of controversial in Philadelphia because this core hasn't broken through, but unlike the Met core that just got shattered, at least the Philly core has had regular season success. They bring back Kyle Schwarber. Bryce Harper is still there, obviously. We know how good the pitching can be, especially if Zach Wheeler's healthy. And now you're talking about adding Bo Bichette. And obviously Adolis Garcia, who I don't want to forget, was an addition this offseason. So it makes the Mets' chances in 2026 even more daunting when, besides the lackluster offseason this team has had, you look at Philadelphia. So I am hoping, that's it, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Bo Bichette doesn't end up with the Philadelphia Phillies. But it's scary and it's a threat. And the first email I do want to read is related to Bo Bichette. It's from Nick. Nick writes, Evan, friend, buddy, fellow 90s Mets enthusiast, explain to me like I'm 5. Does Bo Bichette have cooties? Is there some reason we've collectively decided to ignore his free agency? The Mets need an elite right-handed power hitter, and David Stearns is only comfortable signing young players for long-term deals. Why isn't he the number one target of the entire offseason? Bichette is moving on from the left side of the infield, and we currently have a guy with zero experience playing first base. He can't be worse than Pete, obviously talking about Polanco. Stearns has been linked to every older free agent on the market, but a young elite bat who perfectly fits our lineup is not a consideration. Why, Black Dynamite? Why? Feel free to skip that if you don't know the reference. Ha ha, help me. I actually don't know the reference. Hoff laughs. So you understand that reference?
No, I have no idea. Am I up?
You laughed and you had no idea?
No, I have no clue. It just sounded funny.
You're having a rough week.
I am. But it was funny. It was very funny.
All right. I hear Hoff laugh. I assume he knows the reference. So my answer on Bo Bichette, like a lot of things this offseason, I have evolved on so many things because of the state of the current roster, not because I'm changing my mind, but because the state of the offseason and the state of the roster. When we first discussed Bo Bichette, I had a tough time seeing his fit. I think his fit right now, besides like our last emailer had a very good point about his age. Like Bo Bichette is 27 years old. He'll be 28 before the start of the season. That is really young for a free agent. Not everyone is Juan Soto. Most guys are not Juan Soto. So you're 100% right when you talk about the uniqueness of his age being only 28 years old. The negative that we should point out about Bo is that over the last 3 seasons, he has not stayed healthy. He is coming off a really solid season for Toronto. He hit .311, which in this day and age feels crazy. But the year before that, in 2024, he missed half the season. He was horrific. He was unplayable. The year before that, he was really good. And most of his career, he's been really good. So it does feel like 2024 is an outlier in terms of his career. But what is not an outlier is the unreliability of him staying healthy. I just want to put that on the table, just open discussion about the plus, the negatives of Bo Bichette. But where I can see him fitting now with this team is at third base, because he is clearly shifting off shortstop. He's clearly not going to play shortstop with the Mets or with Philadelphia for that matter. So I guess in our world, it would be Bo Bichette playing third base and yet another person learning first base, in this case, Brett Baty. And I think that's the negative to it. Now, you want to tell me, but Evan, as I've talked about with Brett Baty, he has proven himself for a very small period of time. You don't have to overly commit to him. You could have him learn a new position. You could have him DH occasionally, or you could trade him. I still think the Mets are going to make some kind of significant trade before spring training, which is not that far away. And so Brett Baty could very well be a part of a trade like that. But I think what you're doing is, I can't say you're improving yourself defensively at third base because Bichette has not played the position and is also not a very good shortstop. So I can't assume he wouldn't be able to play third base well, but he's never played the position. The only position this man has played in his major league career is shortstop. So I can't assume you're getting better at third base. We know how well Brett Baty played, and you're throwing kind of another question mark into first base. So the fit, like the reason I move warmer to, hey, screw it, I would still do it, is because to his point, I'm desperate for a bat, and I'd be desperate for a right-handed bat. So the idea of adding Bo Bichette to the middle of this lineup, like, sure, I'm all for it. But in terms of the fit, it still feels awkward. Now, before we continue on, you heard the voice of Pete Hoffman. Thank you, everybody, for sending in your resumes. We got a lot of them at the ricob@gmail.com because of Pete selling out me and the Rico Brogna by not playing my Rob Manfred question. But Pete came to me and said, look, I got an innovative idea for the Rico Brogna to make up for the stabbing in the back that I did to you in the podcast. And I said, you know what? I'm a forgiving guy. What do you got? So Hoff, the floor is yours. What is this exciting, innovative idea you have for the Rico Brogna, specifically on this live, if you're consuming on YouTube, exclusive edition of the Rico Brogna? What do you got?
Well, so, and again, I do apologize for, stepping in. But I realized that I made a mistake. And the way to make it up is, I know that you've been dying to take phone calls on this podcast, and I know that people have been dying to talk to you during the podcast. So I found a way to put that together during the podcast. We're going to take phone calls today.
Wow.
At least I hope so, as long as it goes. As long as it works.
I love that. You know what? I'm a nicer person than the other host you work with. I'm a forgiving guy. So even the effort to me is worth it. So even if it backfires and it doesn't work technology-wise, the idea that you are coming to the Rico audience and saying, hey, we have a chance to make this like a WFAN-esque talk show in terms of speaking to callers, I'm all for it. So what is our phone number? I see it on the YouTube screen.
Look at that.
Look at that. If you download the Rico, which I know most of our audience does. Most of our audience listens on the podcast, and we very much appreciate that. Unfortunately, this is a gift that Hoff is only giving the live audience. So we'll work on something that we can give to our podcast audience. But the phone number to use if you are consuming this live, and we're recording it at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I'm back into my old days of doing the overnights. It's 2006 all over again. The toll-free telephone number is 866-540-9326. So along with interactively talking to you via the Rico mailbag, we will take a few calls, assuming it works. 866-540-9326. I commend you. That's a very good idea, Pete.
Thank you very much. And by the way, if this does work, please stop sending in resumes.
It's funny how many I've gotten. A lot of people are very interested in that job.
Yeah, even people in-house, which I have to talk to people about. So.
There was a lot of in-house. All right, so we'll try to take your calls in a little bit. Let me read some more of your emails. TheRicoB@gmail.com. Millie writes, Happy New Year. Love the show. Why are we not talking about Byron Buxton enough? Right-handed center fielder, a slugging percentage that replaces Pete. 3 years left on a very friendly deal. Yes, he's extremely injury prone and has a no trade, but to me, he's easily worth the risk. What's stopping them? I think you hit on the biggest issue, Millie, and that is the no trade clause, because last year there was an indication that he wasn't going to be interested in waiving it, number one. And number two, you need the Twins to want to trade him. So on one aspect, you need Buxton's willingness to waive it to come here, but you also need the Minnesota Twins to be interested in trading him. And right now, it doesn't feel like that's the case. It feels like the Minnesota Twins were mentioned early in the offseason as a team that could trade Joe Ryan, that could trade Pablo Lopez, that could trade Byron Buxton. We talked a lot about those guys. And it feels now here in January that there isn't really a strong indication that they're willing to trade them. The injuries are a big risk on Buxton, which is what scares me off. But like I mentioned earlier about Bichette, I think we're getting to the part of the offseason as a fan where I'm looking at the current state of the roster and I'm saying, I just want to get better. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today about Kyle Tucker, and he was expressing all his worries about Kyle Tucker and the flaws of Kyle Tucker and said he doesn't do it for me. I'd rather have Pete Alonso, things like that. And what I said to him is, I'm not going to argue about all the things you said about Tucker, but here's what you can argue. He is much better than what they currently have. And that doesn't mean just give him what he wants. I'm certainly not at that point of the offseason. But I think when you talk about players like Bo Bichette, like Byron Buxton, like Kyle Tucker, we can find the flaws in all of them. They would significantly improve this current Met roster. Significantly. Because right now, think about what the outfield looks like just on that surface. It's Juan Soto. He is the only everyday major league outfielder on this roster. Tyrone Taylor is a major leaguer. Tyrone Taylor is a fourth or fifth outfielder. That's all he is. So I know we have hopes for Carson Bench and we have hopes for Jet Williams, but right now, look at the state of the outfield. And you'll want to get better. All right, a couple of other things I do want to touch on. Opening day. Opening day this season has been greatly affected, Met fans. Two things. One is minor for some. The other one is major. The start time of opening day, which was scheduled to be at 3:10, is now being moved back to 1:15 because the New York Mets are going to be a part of the NBC doubleheader on opening day. So I don't think the start time affects that many people. If you were going to take off to go to a 3:10 game, I doubt 1:15 makes a big difference. Now, it makes a big difference to me personally. I'll have to figure that out. But in terms of the broadcast, that's where I think it affects a lot of Met fans. If you're not going to opening day, and think about it, yes, there'll be 45,000 people there, but the vast majority are not a part of the 45,000. So there's a lot of people that are watching opening day. To not have Gary, Keith, and Ron is a major disappointment. And it's the same thing Yankee fans are dealing with because remember, they're opening up their season the night before on Netflix, if I'm not mistaken, and they don't get their announcers. So it sucks. And there's no other way to put it. It's a part of the new landscape of Major League Baseball. And it's not that new because we've had nationally televised games for a while, but it does feel like there's a lot more. And it really hits harder when it's opening day. Because opening day in baseball, I think more so than any other sport, it feels like a national holiday. It's an event. And if you're not there, if you're not in the ballpark with the bunting and the 45-degree weather and all that and the smell of the hot dog, you'll want to hear our guys. And I believe Met fans have a connection with our announcers that I think is deeper than any other team. When you take a look at the longevity of a guy like Gary Cohen, who even before SNY was calling the games on the radio, he's been a Met broadcaster for a million years, and obviously the connection to guys who played on a legendary team like Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling. So it sucks. And as soon as I saw the announcement that they were going to be on NBC, my first thought was selfishly, because I was like, ooh, 3:00 first pitch. I'm off the air at 2:00. This is perfect. Now I'll be on the air, technically, for 45 minutes of opening day, though. I got to tell you, I've thought about this over the last few hours. I am pondering just like taking the day off. I know that feels like a sellout move because, got to talk about opening day. Yeah, I'll talk about it as a caller. I'll call into Tiki and talk about opening day. Now, it's a very big moment for Pete Hoffman. He sold me out, but more importantly, he sold the Rico out because I was representing not Evan and Tiki. I was representing the Rico Brogna with my hard question for Rob Manfred. And Pete was the one who put the ixnay on playing that question for Rob. And Pete's give back to the Rico is that he came up with an innovative way, an addition to the Rico, which is taking live phone calls. So we're going to try to take the first ever live phone call in Rico Brogna history. And that person is John Peter in Westchester. John Peter, for the sake of Pete Hoffman, I hope I can hear you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Look at that. He did it. Nice. Welcome to the Rico. What's on your mind, man?
What's up, man? I'm a huge fan. I watch Evan and Tiki every day. I've been watching every single one of your Ricos. Pete was very helpful. I think you guys are a little hard on him, especially Craig. But yeah, I just have two questions, two quick ones.
Yes.
If the Mets were to only get one free agent, Suarez, Valdez, Tucker, or Bellinger, which one would you think we would get? And if you really think that Carson Bench would be an impact come opening day, I don't know if I really see that. But I'm a huge fan. I'm honored to be the first caller on the Rico.
Well, you did a hell of a job. You know what? We will be softer on Hoff because look what he pulled off. He was able to pull off you, John Peter, calling up the Rico and asking two very good questions. I appreciate that, and so does Pete. Pete very much appreciates that.
Dick to him.
Thank you, man. I think they need Carson Bench to have an impact on opening day. Unless they're adding multiple outfielders, and it feels difficult to imagine that right now. Look, they need to add one at the minimum and then allow a Tyrone Taylor, Carson Bench, Jet Williams battle to ensue. If they added Robert Jr. and a Bellinger or Tucker, well, then all bets are off. Then I don't think they're asking as much from Carson Bench. But right now, with the current state of the team, they need one of these young players to step up. Now, I put out a poll the other day because on the last Rico, if you guys didn't download it, you can, episode 616. We went for Ranger Suarez versus Framber Valdez, kind of broke it down, the pluses of both guys. And ultimately, I gave you a slight preference to Ranger Suarez. I want to remember who I was preferring. But I put the poll out there for the audience based on their opinions, maybe based on listening to the Rico. Who do you prefer, assuming the contracts are similar? And the majority disagreed with me. It was 64% said Framber Valdez. Now, I get it because Valdez has a more proven track record. But if you're asking me, and these are two very different questions, who do I prefer if the Mets are only going to sign one versus who do I think the Mets would sign of the four? They're very different. The think would probably be Ranger Suarez. That if you're telling me, hey, Evan, make a prediction, Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, only one. Which one will the Mets sign? I'm going to lean towards a pitcher, and I'm going to lean towards a pitcher that doesn't end up getting a long-term contract. And I'm going to lean towards a pitcher who's younger than the other pitcher. So by process of elimination, again, prediction would be Ranger Suarez. What may surprise people out there, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks, if you're telling me I can only have one of those four guys, my answer is Kyle Tucker. And it's kind of simple when you think about it. Kyle Tucker's better than all those guys. And I know it's very tough to compare a starting pitcher to an outfielder, but Kyle Tucker is a star player in this league. He is a perennial all-star caliber player. Is he perfect? Not saying he is. Would he come here with flaws? Absolutely. Are there lingering questions that have somehow been created that he doesn't love baseball or he may not be a New York guy? Sure. But this is a guy who the last 4 years is an all-star caliber player. This is a guy who in a bad season, his worst season, puts up an 800 OPS. This is a guy who, on average, will hit 30 home runs and drive in 100 runs. This is a guy who will steal 25 to 30 bases, maybe more if he stays healthy. He's just really good. I mean, it ain't that complicated sometimes. And even though, yes, the Mets have not addressed their starting pitching, and it feels like they need to, and I want them to, their lineup, in my opinion, has gotten worse. And I know this is an argument that we've had a lot, and I certainly laid out at the beginning of last season. I think scoring runs is really, really important. And in a lot of ways, more important. Because year after year after year, the perennial playoff teams are the ones who score runs. It's just the facts. The more runs you score, the greater chance you have of making the postseason. Yes, the Met pitching collapsed last year, but the Met offense also underachieved. It wasn't just the pitching, even though the pitching was a main culprit of it. I'd like to do both. I want them to do both. But if you're giving me the option of one of those 4 free agents, I would say Kyle Tucker. Ed writes, hey, Evan, I've always wanted to ask you this question. You're a Brooklyn Nets fan, a New York Mets fan, and a New York Jets fan. If you had to pick one other New York team to win a championship, who would you prefer between the Giants, Yankees, and Knicks? I know you hate the Knicks and the Yankees, even though you have a secret love affair with all of the Yankees wanting all their players. And I don't know if you hate the Giants. So which of the 3 would you choose to win if you could choose one? Ed, this is a question that most of my life has been very easy. It is not easy anymore. I don't like the Knicks. I hate the Knicks, blah, blah, blah. That's obvious. So the Knicks, I mean, they're not an option. You could cross them out. And the Yankees, I can't live in a world in which the Yankees are world champions. So the answer has always been the New York Giants. But I'm surrounded now by obnoxious Giant fans. Like, we used to live in a world at WFAN, and I'm not saying it was a better place, but we used to live in a world at WFAN where there were no Giant fans. I mean, think about it. Think about the lineup. I think this is the lineup in FAN history the most consistent in terms of there not being changes. Because in the early days of Imus and Mike and the Mad Dog, the midday show would change a lot. I think the Shredder and the Smoozer had the longest run of about 4.5 or 5 years. So the longest consistent run of regular programming on WFAN was between 2008 and 2017, which is incredible. It was a 9-year run where it was Boomer and Carton in the morning, Joe and I in the midday, and Mike Francesa in afternoons. And then Steve Summers at night. Not one Giant fan. Joe and I, obviously Jet fans. Mike, I don't know what he is. Carton, Jet fan. Boomer, I don't know. Independent football analyst. And now, and it's good that there are Giant fans. Do not get me wrong. It's great that we have an eclectic mix of fandoms at this radio station. But Sean Morash is a Giant fan. Tiki Barber is a Giant legend. Chris Big Mac McMonagle is a Giant fan. Tommy Lugauer at nights is a Giant fan. Like, we are surrounded by Giant fans. And I've always believed this when it comes to sports and our little New York rivalries. We end up hating the other team because of the people around us. That's what causes us to not like the other New York team. So normally I'd say I'll let the Giants win. I wouldn't be bothered by them, but I'm surrounded by Giant fans. With that said, the answer is still the Giants. Because I come on, I'm doing the Rico. You all know we can't have the Yankees win a World Series. So I guess that one is a little bit more difficult than it's been in the past, but still pretty straightforward. Let us say good evening or morning or afternoon, depending on how you feel, to Peter in Lexington, Massachusetts. Peter, welcome in to the Rico Brogna. What's up, man?
Hey, Evan, really appreciate you doing this. Credit to you and Pete for making this work, since I'd never be able to get through to the fans. I've written in before, but I appreciate you letting me say over the phone that I love the Rico also. So
thank you, man. Appreciate it.
I wanted to start off by saying how frustrating it's been that the baseball offseason is so much slower and protracted compared to football and the NBA. And this really takes away a lot from the excitement from the offseason. And I don't know how baseball is going to fix it. For example, I've heard some ideas about giving incentives to teams and players who might sign earlier, but this just really takes away from, what the experience can be in terms of, looking out for deals and things. It's just too slow.
I know.
And I think overall, many of us fans have just been increasingly resigned to how not much is going to happen this offseason for the Mets. I really think that David Stearns is trying to build this up from within. He's really going to try to see if he can just get these prospects and use the money to retain people down the road. But I don't think he sees the value in signing free agents and giving up draft pick compensation. I would have loved to go after the Japanese players like Okamoto and Amai, because at least you're not giving up compensation and the deals are really fair. But I think, this is probably what we're going to be left with. Maybe a starter, maybe and hopefully something for the outfield, but I don't think we're going to get any blockbusters like you've been saying lately.
I think you're right. I think that, and look, they need to add a outfielder. I mean, they cannot go into spring training with this group of outfielders. Could you imagine that? I don't even know how we would formulate a lineup with what they currently have. But I think, unfortunately, you're right. And that's why it's tough. And thanks for the call, man. Like, we talk about Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger, and I've said this over and over again. I don't think they're ending up with either. We talk about them because they're available, and until they're not signed somewhere, there's always that possibility. But I've laid it out where I just don't see where the contract is going to fit into David Stearns' comfort and the player's comfort, and another team who clearly is more appealing, like Toronto or Los Angeles, not ending up with the player. And you go back to the Japanese players, I completely agree. And that's why I was so disappointed, specifically with Okamoto, that they didn't end up with him. Because he's young, it was relatively cheap compared to what proven major leaguers get, and there's no draft pick compensation. So I agree with you. Now, to your question about the offseason, that was one of the things brought up to Rob Manfred. Can there be a deadline? The thing that Rob didn't bring up, he didn't bring it up because Rob is very much about the owners, and I get it. He works for the owners, is we offered a deadline and the players didn't want to do it. Yeah, because a deadline with no benefit is negative for players. Like, they will then panic and have to just take whatever the owners are offering. Like, I think that's how they view it. That's how they assume it would work out. We obviously don't know because it's never happened, but that's the assumption the players have. So what you'd have to offer is, and this is the idea that we've bantied about. I think we had an email about it on the last Rico, and I've talked about it before, which is maybe if you sign before a deadline, that contract is luxury tax proof. Like, it doesn't count against the tax. So it benefits the owner to be aggressive, and it benefits the player because they're probably going to get a better offer before that deadline that's created. But the offseason sucks. There's no arguing it. And ironically, next year, because of the lockout, we will have an exciting offseason because we're going to get two giant cycles of free agency. The lockout's going to begin on December 1st. So that time period between the World Series ending and December 1st is going to be crazy. Like, we're going to be probably doing Ricos every freaking day. And guys are going to sign, and it's going to be nuts, just like it was in 2021 into 2022. Then, whenever they settle the lockout, assuming that they do, there's then a frenzy of moves leading into spring training. So it's funny how we all want a deadline, and yet next year, because of something we hate, the lockout, it's actually going to work. Now, more on Manfred I do want to touch on. I had an argument with Sean on Evan and Tiki and with some callers because I was getting a lot of pushback from people that I was being the jerk. Rob Manfred had an answer to Big Mac's question about realignment, which is another topic we've talked about here on the Rico, the idea of the Mets and the Yankees being in the same division. And so Big Mac asked him about expansion and realignment, and Rob confirmed expansion will happen someday, which we all know. My guess, my best guess, is Nashville and Portland as the two cities, but we shall see. And then Rob went on for 2 minutes about geographic realignment and why it would be good for baseball. And I admit, even though I disagree with it, like because I'm a traditionalist, I understand it. Like his best point was the playoffs, because he said a lot of times just because of East versus West, you'll end up with an East Coast team playing at 10 o'clock at night, and that is not good. If the playoffs were exclusively East, exclusively West, kind of like the NBA, it would actually benefit fans and benefit the TV viewers. He's not wrong. I can't argue that. As much as we freaks as Met fans love staying up till 11 o'clock at night for Mets Diamondbacks in the 1999 divisional series, I can only imagine how many people actually did it. Just because I did it and just because you did it doesn't mean the majority of people did it. So Rob made a very fair point about the playoffs. He made a fair point about travel. Hey, these guys play 162 games in 188 days. And as much as travel is easier today than it was 30 years ago, and yes, the guys are flying, in these beautiful private jets or team jets, whatever it is still a lot of travel. All you got to do is look at the Mets schedule this year. The Mets schedule is insanity with the amount of times they go to the West Coast. Now, that could be fixed by them just going to the West Coast once and playing all of those teams, but whatever. So he goes on and on about, yes, we're going to geographically realign, and then says, but I don't want the Mets and the Yankees or teams in the same cities in the same division. I was dumbfounded by that. Now, Hoff, you're having a very good day today. So you're on everybody's good list with the calls. They've sounded great. You're letting people be interactive. As you sat there, and I don't know if as producer you weren't able to listen to every second, but when he went on a diatribe about geographically realigning, but then ends it with, but the Mets and the Yankees won't be in the same division, were you not confused the way I was? To which was, then what did you just say for the last 2.5 minutes?
I was confused, but I feel like he's going to still try to separate them as much as possible, which I agree with. I don't want to have a division with Mets and Yankees play each other like every 20 games a season. But you're right. Like at the end of the day, I think there's still going to be, if they had like conferences or whatever it is, I feel like it'd still be the same conference.
So what that means then, and I jotted this down just to see if like this makes sense, is that like the Met division could be Mets, Phillies, Nationals, Pirates. Okay, so it's a little bit different because you're taking out Miami and Atlanta, but again, geographic, right? Pittsburgh is very close, all on the East Coast. The Yankee division would be Yankees, Red Sox, Orioles, Blue Jays. You'd create a Southern division of the Marlins, the Rays, the Braves, and Nashville. You'd have like a centralish division of the Guardians, the Tigers, the White Sox, and the Royals. A National League centralish division, which is, again, what they have, Cubs, Cardinals, Reds, Brewers. But all of those teams would be in one conference. So, for example, the Mets and the Yankees could play each other in a wild card series. The Mets and the Yankees could play each other in a divisional series, and then it would be East versus West. So the winner of, the Dodgers, Giants, Padres, A's, Angels, Mariners, Astros, Rangers, Rockies, Cubs, Cardinals, Brewers, that conference's winner would face our conference's winner. So we would eliminate the idea of a Subway Series, but we wouldn't put them in the same division. But we would get rid of the leagues. It feels stupid. Like, if you're going to radically realign, just effing do it then. I would almost say put them in the same division. Why are we keeping them separate? For what purpose then? You're getting rid of the leagues. So what does it mean? If the leagues aren't going to matter in the playoffs, who cares if they don't matter in the regular season? You know what I mean?
I mean, I yes, but I still don't think he knows. I hate to say this. I don't think he knows what he's talking about because I think they're trying to do a good combination of, we see what the NFL does. They still have their AFC and NFC, and they still kind of separate. Like the Jets and Giants don't play in the same division. They're not in the same conference. You know what I mean? So maybe we could do something like that. But again,
it's not. But Hoff, it's not like that, because in the NFL, it's not separated by East and West in the playoffs. Like it's an AFC and it's an NFC. It's really the NBA and the NHL. And in the NBA and the NHL, the local teams are in the same division. So it's almost as if, look, we all have different opinions on this. I'm going to respect it. I would not radically realign. I would keep the leagues. If I'm going to lose out on that, like I lost out on the DH debate, if I'm going to lose that and we're going to go to geographic realignment, then the Mets and the Yankees should be in the same division. Like, you're saving history for no reason, because you're really not even saving history by putting them in separate divisions, but then allowing them to face each other in the postseason, which means there are no leagues. They're gone. The AL and the NL is gone unless you're keeping like a commemorative name that means nothing. It just feels half measured and doesn't make sense. That's my point.
Now, listen, I get it. I mean, at this point in time, you're right. It makes sense just to go to one full league. I mean, there's nothing, you said it, there's nothing that separates the leagues at all.
The other thing I disagree with, and Rob said it, and again, Rob also said he's going to retire after his contract in 2029, which means he may not even make this decision. I am adamantly against 4-team divisions. I hate it. I do not like 4-team divisions. I think the biggest issue I run into is that the odds of a sub-500 team winning the division are high. Because all you got to do is look at any of the 4-team divisions I created. I'll give you this one: the Guardians, the Tigers, the White Sox, and the Royals. Is it not unimaginable that you're going to get a 78-win team to win the division one year? I would much rather have 4 8-team divisions. However you want to do it. Again, my preference is to not radically realign, to keep the leagues. But I think an 8-team division makes a lot more sense than a 4-team division. I think it's too small, and it creates too much of a possibility of a bad team winning the division.
See, the way I look, I disagree, because I like the 4-team division, and what I would do is I'd go back to adding more games in that division, and someone's got to win out. You're gonna because of that, someone's gonna have a winning record. Not saying they're great, but at least the record is going to say that they're better, or find a different way to like go to a point system like hockey.
Oh, I have an email about a point system, actually. I may have to skip to that one right now because you said point system. All right, here it is. You ready?
All right.
I came organized. I made sure I printed them.
Look at you.
John writes, "Hey, Evan, first-time emailer, long-time listener. I think that the Manfred man dilutes the quality of a win in extra innings. Similarly, I feel as though a loss in extras is not as bad as 1 in 9 innings because you could lose without giving up a hit. The Manfred man is an imperfect solution, but it's better than having a 15-inning game in the middle of a 14-day stretch. But I still think it can be improved by implementing a points system for standings like they do in the NHL. Here's how I would do it. Any win is 2 points, same as the NHL. A loss in extra innings is 1 point, same as the NHL. The first tiebreaker should still be a head-to-head, but the second tiebreaker should be 9-inning wins, similar to regular overtime wins in the NHL. This would devalue the Manfred man wins, given the new tiebreaker, while also improve the value of losses by giving a point. Do you agree? If not, why should we treat the Manfred man wins and losses the same as regular season wins and losses? I'll hang up and listen. John makes freaking great points. My first reaction, John, is I think a point system is so weird and confusing. Like, yes, hockey's had it, but baseball's all about you're 2 games out. You're 1 game out. It would be so bizarre to go to a point system. But I want to put that aside because bizarre, what does that mean? Like, that's not a good, my answer is not a good answer. Just because I'm not used to it, just because that's so weird, that's not a good answer. He is 1,000% right. We sat there all year, man. Those wins, those losses, they're fluky. They're putting a guy on second base. And I know when we win the game, it feels good and we walk off and we don't think twice about it. But when we lose a game like that, it is like the shootout. And he's right. We don't treat shootout wins as if we treat the win the same. And he's saying we do, but we shouldn't treat the loss the same. So as odd as it would be to have a point system, I got to tell you, John, I can't sit here and argue it because I am anti-Manfred man on second. And I do feel like it's not a real loss or even a real win. So that seems to be a fair way to make it work. My other idea, and I know why they're not going to go for it, is to play like 12 regular innings and then go to the Manfred man in the 13th, as opposed to doing it right away in the 10th inning. So at least you give teams the opportunity to have like a real baseball winner And then, yes, when it gets out of hand, and now, so we're killing the 18-inning game because I know, God forbid, we have an 18-inning game. We only had it for 100 years, but God forbid, everyone needs to go home. But to at least give you a few innings of real baseball, and then fine, we'll go to the Manfred man.
So here's the reason why, and I hate this actually. I actually hate this in hockey. But to your point about you're going to have a sub 500 team go into the playoffs if it was a four team divisions, with the way that hockey puts up their records, they have the overtime loss. So we'd have the extra inning loss, which would then take away from the real losses.
I know.
So it looks like you're more of like a 500 above 500 team.
It would look weird.
Yeah.
I agree. My first argument against it is that it's weird, but I think the crux of his point is very fair, which is they have a shootout because it is unhealthy in the NHL to make these guys play 8 overtimes. Like it could never happen. We do it in the postseason. It's different. It's the playoffs. God, go crazy. Same thing to a degree in football. Like I know it's very rare that we get a tie, but yeah, they're not going to let you play forever. In the postseason, they'll let you play forever. In baseball, they change the rules just like they do in hockey in such a weird way that it's not the same game. It would be like if there was a 3-point shootout at the end of an NBA game, you know?
Well, what they could do too, by the way, in baseball to really go ape crazy, you go top of the 10th and bottom of the 10th with the man on second base. And if no one wins, home run derby.
I hate you. You're not alone because after they did that in the All-Star game, people were like, ooh, should they bring that to baseball? Let's take one more caller. Pete's innovative idea today, taking calls on the Rico Brogna at 866-540-9326. We'll do it again. I think maybe it can become a Friday night tradition. When we do our Friday night, Saturday morning Ricos, that probably seems like a perfect time. So what's up to Ryan and Comac? Thank you very much for checking in on the Rico. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, Evan. How you doing, guys?
Good, man.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I hadn't listened to the full episode yesterday, but I saw that the title was "The Mets are not getting Kyle Tucker," and I know the argument that you were making was based on the way that they've been operating this offseason, not bringing back Pete, and wanting to get off the long-term contract for Brandon Nimmo, that the Kyle Tucker move doesn't really fit into what David Stearns has been doing. But given the fact that Kyle Tucker is a much better player overall, fits into the mold of what David Stearns looks to be doing, why wouldn't that be a fit? If they could sign him to a Scherzer or a Verlander, high AAV, let's say 4-year deal, $160 million, opt out after the second year.
I'll tell you why, and I'll ask it back to you, so we can have a back and forth. If they get Tucker to agree to a 4-year, let's say it's $40 million a year, right? They give him an absurd amount of money with opt-outs. Don't you think the Los Angeles Dodgers would match that? And if they did, Kyle Tucker's not picking us over the LA Dodgers, right?
Something interesting I saw recently. I saw a tweet. I don't remember exactly who it was from, but it was stating his old hitting coach is now the Mets hitting coach. He was drafted when Stearns was in the organization. I thought it would be a weird fit because he seems like a laid-back guy, kind of. Even Chicago seemed like a big market for him. I was doing a little overthinking. I was like, maybe he's a Kevin McReynolds type who doesn't actually seem to like baseball all that much.
Right.
Off season's too long to think about all of this. But, I mean, he does have the connections here. With the hitting coach, with David Stearns, and somebody else I forgot that I saw. But yes, I mean, if I'm making the decision and it comes down to the Dodgers and the Mets, it makes more sense to sign with the Dodgers. But given his connections with people in the organization currently, I think there might be more of an opportunity than we're thinking possibly right now.
I hope you're right. And look, Ryan, thank you for the call. Maybe this is, and I hope it's not, because I'm trying to be very rational here. Maybe it's my own mental game that I am so scarred from this offseason. I'm expecting the worst, but I am trying to use logic that the Blue Jays and the Dodgers are threats. That has been widely reported. Lately the Mets are connected to Kyle Tucker, but it's always in relation to the Dodgers are involved and the Blue Jays are involved. And it feels like the offers would be the same or similar. And if they are, he's picking one of those two teams, specifically LA. Like, I think Toronto is more involved on a long-term deal. And what Tucker and his agent have to decide is that the ultimate long-term deal? Whatever they can get out of Toronto, let's say it's 8 years, $300 million. I have no idea. Do the agents say, let's take that, that's a great deal? Or do they say, you know what, let's rehab the value? Because if Kyle Tucker could have a season in which he plays every single game, because remember, last year he played 136. The year before that, he played 78. And last year, he fell off in the second half of the season for whatever reason. If he could have a complete season like he did in, say, 2023, where he was a 5.5 WAR player, where he led the league in RBIs, where he had almost a 900 OPS, if he can do that and go back into free agency, he could get a bigger contract. If that's what his agent determines and he's settling on a short-term deal, I just worry that's where the Dodgers become the factor. That's how the Dodgers always try to become factors in a lot of these free agent cases. So my negativity around why I don't see it happening, even though we spend so much time talking about it, which shows you I do want it to happen. Like, he makes the Mets better. I just don't see them outbidding the Dodgers on the short-term deal, and I don't see them outbidding the Blue Jays on a long-term deal. But it's funny to think, okay, so he's 29 years old. Actually, he's turning 29 in a week. So he's 28 for now, but his birthday is a week from, it's on Saturday, January 17th. As a 29-year-old player, would the Mets feel comfortable going 6 years? Is that a number where they say, yeah, we'll go 6 years for him? And the answer is probably. That's probably the cutoff, though. And I don't think Kyle Tucker is taking a 6-year deal. I think if he doesn't get a 9-year deal, he takes a short-term deal and rolls the die to go back into free agency. And the other thing is this, and I'm willing, and I think our last caller is willing, is David Stearns willing to sign Tucker to a short-term deal, bring him in, have him opt out, lose him, and lose the draft pick? Now, it's one thing to give up a draft pick for Juan Soto. You've got him for the next million years. Are you giving it up for a guy who ends up taking just a short-term contract? That's the ultimate question. Well, we've got good news. Pete Hoffman has retained his job as producer of the Rico, came up big. We were able to take calls today. I think it was a success, and I do think we will now incorporate this into Rico Brogna's probably on Fridays when we do our mailbag edition. We've kind of come accustomed to Friday mailbags. The schedule is basically doing a Rico every other day. It's basically how we've done it during the offseason. Recordings on Friday nights, recordings on Sunday nights, recordings on Wednesday nights. So we'll try to keep that going. I thought that was a great feature. So great job by Pete. Week 1 closes with a giant victory for Pete Hoffman. Not the Giants. They don't play. And we'll see how they do in the coaching search. But we do appreciate you listening and downloading the Rico Brogna. If you're new, make sure you download, subscribe. And like I mentioned, we try to keep the Rico during the offseason on a schedule where we're live on YouTube. You download the podcast maybe a couple of hours later, but we try to get you at least 3 or 4 podcasts per week, even during the slow part of the offseason. I do want to remind you, we have another Rico Rewatchable coming up. That is the return to baseball after September 11th, the Mike Piazza game, as it's famously called. And we will be doing that Rico Rewatchable the first week of February. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, and hanging out with us on another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.